What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of HR Heretics. Today, we are doing a segment on your first team. So there's a book that I highly recommend everybody go and read. It's called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and it's by Patrick Lencioni, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mm-hmm. And I read this book probably like 6 or 7 years ago, Kelly, and I learned a lot about what causes toxicity inside of an organization. And so essentially what Patrick describes is this notion of who is your first team. And he goes through this fictional, maybe not even fictional, probably a real executive team that has dysfunctions. And the primary reason it has dysfunctions is because all of those executives are managing as if like their team is the most important thing versus the actual team should be their executive team as the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So Kelly, have you read this book? What's your take?
Yeah, no, the book's great. It's very, I like it too because I have short attention span. It's not a long book. It's an easy read. Yeah. It's easy to understand. It's story-based. Although I always felt bad for the marketing person, right? I mean, the CMO and that is like the antagonist. Yeah, I felt bad for the marketing person. We struggle. I've seen it in my whole career. I'm sure you have too, and others on the line here. It's a constant toggle. And it's a constant balance, holding that tension between the executive team, i.e. your peers, and that C team. I'll just use myself as an example. And my HR team, my people team, my leadership team. And there are always tensions between the two. There are things that, you might not agree with at the C team, first team level that negatively impacts your people team. You have to kind of toe the line, support that. Like that's where it gets into trouble. And the more dysfunctional, right? We trust was a big deal in that book, right? The more dysfunctional that C team is, the more communication breaks down and trust breaks down. I feel like the more that those executives see their own functional organization as their first team, because it starts to become an us versus them type of thing, which is where the danger comes in.
Yeah. I think it's also just the natural inclination of the people that you hire, you spend a lot of time with, you build really deep relationships with, and the human inclination is just to have them be your first team and to specifically thinking about when they have qualms or concerns to give those credence, potentially even above like the qualms or concerns of the issues of the business. Mm-hmm. And so, I think there's actually a couple of takeaways that I think about with first team. I think the first thing is like, I think everybody's first team in the company should be the exec team. And that sounds like kind of crazy. So say you're like an IC3 engineer and, your CEO gives a presentation on, the direction of the company, and potentially you get information from your manager to do something differently than that. I think you should be really thoughtful because given that like your CEO just gave this presentation, you should be doing what the C team wants you to do. And, there's a really challenging word that I'm going to use, but it's insubordination. And I think there's actually quite a bit of this inside of companies to where people go rogue, and it can be damaging because if people aren't rowing in the same direction, Kelly, I think that's where problems really pop up inside of companies.
I'm chuckling because you always accuse me of, describing utopias. And I think what you just described is a utopia, right? An IC3 engineer who is, just blindly like the executive team is my first team manager. And that's just not realistic in a lot of ways, right? These folks, they don't even see the execs half the time. They're so close with their teams, their managers. And so that's a really hard thing to make happen. I agree with it. And this is where you see companies fall over themselves for waterfall OKRs, line of sight. Like they spend a lot of time at making sure, and we've all heard the phrase, that every employee in the company has line of sight to how they are contributing to the vision, this and that. And that's easier to do the smaller the companies are. Yep. Obviously harder to do once the ship gets really big, because then it becomes a big game of telephone. Then you have different loyalties, then you have subcultures, then you have, but I always say that is the challenge. Like that is the game, and I believe some of the secret sauce in scaling culture, in rowing in the same direction, is can you grow an organization and minimize the game of telephone?
Yep. Kelli, I want to talk about your experience with this because I know there's been times in my career to where my team has vehemently disagreed with the executive team's direction or a decision that the exec team made.
Yeah.
And how do you go about getting your team on board when they're like, I can't believe that we're doing this, and they're looking at you to try and stop the train from continuing to get out of the station?
Yeah. It's like threading a damn needle. It is a huge balance. And I'll start with what not to do. Maybe what I've seen in my time is kind of the barbell thing. I've seen two vehemently like opposing things that executives have done that are equally terrible, in my opinion, and don't balance those things. So one of those things is they will like vehemently oppose the exec team, and they will kind of commiserate with their team, so to speak, right? They become one of the natives. They become peers of their own damn lieutenants, and they commiserate and they say, this sucks, everyone. They're doing this to us. Like, I don't agree. That's not good. You know what I mean? That's not good. And then the opposite of that is not explaining how it was hard and being a robot and saying, all right, everyone, let's go. We're doing this. And everyone's like, what the hell? So you have to like let some air out of the balloon without popping it. It's okay to like, I love to explain how the sausage was made. Listen, I know you all don't like this. This is transparency of process. This is what went down, and using judgment. Here was my role in that. Here's how I opposed it, or here's how I represented this. Here was the response. And usually the story is more balanced than just the outcome statement. Do you know what I mean? So you take them through that process, you empathize a little bit, and then you say, no, listen, saddle up, But I've seen people that are they just parrot the decision with nothing. That sucks. And they become a victim, and they start to like act like a toddler with their team, which also sucks.
And when that happens, I think that entire team is a lost cause. And I've experienced it. And, we as a peer to other executives to where this has happened, there is literally like nothing you can do to bring those people back if their leader is going to act that way. And so what Kelli and I are really trying to do is like, don't be this leader. And in fact, one of the things that I like to tell my teams when they don't agree with the decision is that nobody knows what the future is. And so, a lot of times when we're thinking about these really tough decisions, I think about one-way door decisions and I think about two-way door decisions. And so a one-way door decision is like, we are going this way and we cannot come back. Most decisions actually aren't that. Most decisions, if they are two-way doors where it's like, hey, we can go test this thing, and if it doesn't work, we can roll it right back. The one-way door decisions typically have to do with like when your reputation is like on the line, and you need to take a lot of time to think about those. But I tend to see when people don't want to get on board, they want their way. And I just think all of us need to have a lot of humility as we're going through different paths and exploring different ways that we can go about running a business. Because like nobody really knows what the future is. And I find that like when I talk to my teams about this and say like, look, like let's keep an open mind. I don't know what the future is. And then using the Bezos quote, I've said this a few times on the show, will you gamble with me? I find that like that gets people on board faster than anything else.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Your workforce is both your organization's greatest strength and largest single cost. With Planful, it's easy to unlock the secrets of successful workforce planning so you and your HR team can make the right business decisions. Imagine using data-driven insights to develop accurate forecasts, close hiring gaps, and adjust talent acquisition plans collaboratively based on costs today and into the future. Planful lets you collaborate with colleagues in finance to understand the value your employees bring to the table. And the best part, You can get started with Planful in just weeks with minimal help from IT. Plus, with Planful, you get an endless runway. Planful grows with you, no matter how fast or large your team scales. Ready to transform your HR strategy? Join over 1,500 organizations worldwide who trust Planful as their go-to workforce planning software at planful.com/heretics. Real talk, most talent leaders haven't yet cracked how to leverage AI for meaningful impact on their hiring processes and business goals. But the leaders who are effectively using AI to transform their recruiting team's efficiency and quality use Metaview. Metaview is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. That means your people can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Join forward-thinking talent leaders at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Fora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and two more things I'll add on that is, back to the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, right? A lot of that first team trust is also explaining how your functional team is feeling about something, right? Like, I'll just use Pendo as an example. Great first team. And I was able to say, like, listen, my team is not happy about this. Here's why, right? Here are the implications of this that maybe you haven't thought of or whatnot from this perspective. We'll work through it and we'll figure out solutions or options or pathways. But I want you all to know that this is like the brick wall that you're pushing them through. They're not pleased. Send them a Slack, give them some extra support the next couple of months. Like, there are ways to serve both teams in a mature way without stomping and pouting, and crying about it. And the other thing that I'll say is like, it's the same thing we just talked about in the founder-led one, right? Like, you explain to your team, like, listen, there are things that you don't know, right? That are going on in the C team. Like, you're seeing your job from the HRBP leader for all of tech for this company. You are not seeing this decision through the eyes of the CFO, the CMO, the CRO. Like, they just have different frames of reference. And so if you can help each team, it doesn't matter. You help your first team and you help your functional team understand frame of references outside of what they're seeing. It's easier to bring everyone together and move through it with empathy and understanding versus that's right or that's wrong, because it's just an incomplete picture. And at the end of the day, if you don't like it and you can't live with it, it's up to all of us in these very insane, right, fast-paced, chaotic companies. It's up to all of us to figure out what we can live with and what we can't. And that's okay.
That it's really well said. On the, not understanding what's going on at the C team, or maybe not having like all of the insight into other organizations. That is the case as a leadership team for transparency. And I have consistently found that being more transparent than feels comfortable is almost always the best decision. So people can understand how decisions are made and why they're being made. That way, like, they can work through some of the more challenging issues that have to land on their desk. Maybe it's more work. Maybe it's stuff that they didn't want to do. Maybe it's like a moral challenge that they're trying to sort through. So they can ultimately get to exactly what you just talked about, Kelly, which is voting with your feet. I've actually found that people are really good at complaining about things, but they're not very good at like drawing a hard line and saying like, this crossed my boundary. And now I'm going to start looking for a new role. And so I actually disagree with you, because like, I think it sounds really nice. And I wish it was this way, that people were able to say, hey, like, this crossed a boundary for me, and now I'm going to start looking for other opportunities. People don't do that though. They get toxic.
Yeah, but that's kind of up to the leader, dude. Like I've had so
that's
many
what I want to talk
chats
about.
with my directs that they're like, I can't live with this. And sometimes they're venting and they're immature and they're young in their career and they need a few days.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, listen, I get it. You're not happy about this. I'm not going to like lose my mind, but you need to take the next week or so and figure out if you're in or out, because I can't sleep at night knowing that you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the pool. Like, I don't care which one it is, really. I just want to know which one it is so I can plan for it.
Yep.
Now, one thing I want to say back to what we were talking about around transparency and explaining, decisions to your teams. I will say to the group, honestly, it's secret selfish. Like taking everyone through this and helping them viscerally understand what it's like being in that C team room, how you participate, how you push back, how you bend and compromise. One, you're building future people leaders because you're teaching them, like you always call it the teaching hospital. You're literally like teaching them how to do surgery real time. And two, they get better. So like, as they get better, more like you get to do less work because they're actually like taking on more, to your point earlier, without a lot of handholding.
So Kelli, for people that haven't gotten on board with some of these decisions, it sounds like what your process is you communicate, how the decision was made, why the decision was made. You give everybody, a couple of days of mourning, and then it comes down to like, okay, great. Like you're either in or you're out, like, kind of like get on board or get out of here. Has there ever been
It's a little more empathetic than that.
Sure. I mean, just being, trying to be concise, but then what about people? Have you had somebody who's been like, I just can't get on board with this?
Yeah. Yeah. And look, it doesn't, that is a cultural vibe of a team that starts way before that moment. You can't just like have that one day. Like that's what you build with your trust and the dynamics. And you actually have to let go of the notion that everyone on your team is going to be with you forever. Like everyone's going to go at some point, and that's okay. So get comfortable with succession planning. Get comfortable with the what ifs. I've seen so many people hold on so tight because they don't want to think about that or deal with that. So that's like half of that. But it's always from the get-go. It's like, hey, I'm here for your career, whether it's a year here, 5 years here, whatnot. Like you got to go at some point, and we can real talk everything. It's just, don't let me find the resume on the copier, so to speak, one day. Let's talk through it.
I love that. The other thing I would say, though, is that what I love about your approach is that you nip the toxicity in the bud. And this is the worst part of working in companies, is when an employee goes toxic and their manager doesn't handle it.
Yeah.
And because it spreads.
Yeah.
It's just negativity amongst humans spread.
Yeah.
And we have to, as managers, it is impendent upon us to stop that.
Yeah. A lot of people avoid. It's human nature, right? You don't want to, I always use the phrase lean into the awkwardness. I'm like, this is awkward. I don't want to have this chat, Nolan, but what the hell's going on? And you use a little humor. I mean, you just talk to people like humans, and usually it's a lot easier to work through things.
Yep. I think that's really well said, Kelli. All right. Well, let us know what you all think about this one. Don't let your team get toxic, and we'll talk to you soon.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.